Hello, friends. Today we have part 2 of our Stages of Grief series, and we are going to talk about denial, and more specifically, denial in regards to abortion. I just want to address that this episode is not meant to condemn anybody or make anybody feel less than, okay? This episode is really to serve as an informative episode about denial and how it relates to an abortion decision. So, if you are someone that regrets your abortion, I pray that this series and this episode in particular are going to help you seek the healing that you need. And if that's not you, just please understand that what I'm about to say is not meant to come from any place of ill will. This is just truth that I'm sharing in love to help those women that are struggling. So with that, we're going to get into the episode. If you want to take notes, grab a pen and some paper, and we are going to get started. Are you struggling with the pain of a past abortion and longing for help, but don't know where to turn? Maybe you don't struggle with the pain of a past abortion, but are longing for redemption for a sin that you think is too big and too bad. Friend, you're in the right place. I'm Brittany, a wife, mom, and post-abortive woman that is now on a mission to help other women find hope and healing through Jesus. For over 10 years, I tried to hide the pain I carried with me as a result of my choice to have an abortion when I was 17 years old. I thought for years that I had committed the one sin that was unforgivable, and I awaited punishment from God and hid this secret in the deepest depths of my soul for over a decade. After years of prompting from the Holy Spirit, I finally found redemption and hope through Jesus and was able to recognize that when He died for everyone, that meant He died for me too. Now that I am healed, God has placed a calling on my heart to go and tell. So here I am, ready to walk alongside you so that you can find true hope and healing too. If you're ready to break free from those chains and recognize that God has a true plan and purpose for you, no matter what you have done in your past, then this podcast is for you. Fill up your favorite mug with some coffee and crack open your Bible because, friend, it's time to receive the good news. Before we jump in, I just want to remind you guys that we do have our Forgiven and Set Free Abortion Recovery Retreat coming up next month, June 22nd through the 25th in Jamestown, North Dakota. We have limited spots available. This is going to be a beautiful private venue with only post-abortive women in attendance. The facilitators will be post-abortive. Our beautiful hostess is also post-abortive. You will be in the company of women who have gone through what you have gone through. Burdens are going to be lifted. Chains will be broken. This will be one of the hardest yet the best thing that you will do for yourself in your healing journey. The hardest part is just taking that first step and committing to coming. So if you've heard me talking about this and you have any inkling of desire to come, please send me a DM on Instagram. You can find me at Good News Pod or at Brittany Poppy. Links are in the show notes. You can also email me at goodnewspod@gmail.com. This weekend is going to be completely transformational for your life. Trust me when I say that you want to be at this retreat. If you struggle at all with pain, regret, depression, friend, the list of symptoms of post-abortion syndrome is long. If you struggle with any of those things, you belong at this retreat. And so please reach out for info. We want to get you plugged in and signed up. It is fast approaching, so don't wait too long. Get on our list soon. With that, I will leave you. I hope to hear from you very soon and see you at our retreat. Okay, friends, let's talk about denial. So I want you for a minute to just kind of think back on a time when you were a kid that you did something wrong. Like you knew it was wrong and you did it anyway. Now, Your parents probably found out. Maybe you blamed it on your sibling. Maybe you internally justified why you did it or externally justified. But I had to, Mom. But deep down, you know that what you did was wrong. This is denial. So if we look at the actual definition of denial, it says the action of declaring something to be untrue. So what we need to recognize is that grief is accompanied by denial. It's one of the stages of grief, and it's typically listed first, though I do want to just stress that the stages of grief can happen out of order. There's really no rule as to how you move through them. However, if you are in the state of denial, it is very difficult, if not impossible, to move through the rest of the stages of grief. Now, when we talk about abortion and denial in regards to an abortion decision, a lot of women are using this as a coping mechanism. And honestly, this denial begins before we have even carried out the abortion. So we must realize that in reality, abortion ended the life of our unborn child. And the reason we have denial over this is because the abortion industry and society has a rhetoric. And this rhetoric talks about things like product of conception, blob of tissue. Stacey Abrams has now said that the fetus at 6 weeks has a manufactured heartbeat that was created by doctors. I don't understand how that can even be an argument, but it is one, and it is one that is shared, and it really just adds to the denial of the fact that human life begins at conception. That, whatever term you want to use, fetus, child, that is a human life. If you were to allow that life to continue to grow inside of the mother, that life would be born into a beautiful baby. That is a human life in its most vulnerable form. And this rhetoric is giving post-abortive women a false way out of this grief because it is preventing women from realizing the gravity of what they have chosen to do. And I just want to remind you that I am saying all of this from a place of 1, love, and 2, from a place of someone who's also chosen to do this. So please remember that. Anytime I share these things, it is not ever to make you feel worse about yourself. It is just to educate and to help move you to a place where you can find the wholeness that God desires for you to have, okay? So I just felt the need to add that in there. So, like I said, I can relate to this. When I was waiting, I think I had about a week or two, maybe like 10 days of a wait between when I found out I was pregnant and when I had my abortion, which when I think back, 10 days is a lot of time. And I don't know how I kept that a secret, but I did. And I repeated that rhetoric over and over and over in my mind prior to and leading up to my abortion, as well as after the fact. This is just a blob of tissue. This is just a clump of cells. It's not going to hurt when it happens. This isn't going to feel anything. It's not alive. I repeated those things over and over and over again because that's what the abortion industry told me. They also told me it was the best thing for me at the time and I would be able to do things that I couldn't have done. And so I would tell myself those things too. I was still going to be able to go to college. I was still going to be able to live in the dorms. So what I'm doing can't be bad because it's the best thing for me. But believing all of those things prevented me for a very long time from going through the entire grieving process of the child that I chose to abort. I was unable to move through those stages because I denied abortion completely. I denied everything that I had grown up knowing that it was. And honestly, I felt some relief due to that denial, and a majority of women do. A majority of women walk out of that abortion facility relieved because for just a moment, you believe that what you've just done was the best thing for you and that you no longer have the weight of that pregnancy on your shoulders. And unfortunately, that relief is extremely short-lived because we cannot deny what we have chosen to do. So, at some point, we find ourselves in a state of feeling as though we need to move through this grief to feel whole, and we don't know how to do that because we continue to hear that rhetoric. So what do we need to do to move on from denial in regards to our own abortion decision? I'm going to tell you 3 things that we can do in order to move through this stage so that we are no longer in denial about the choice that we have made. The first thing is to understand that abortion ends the life of our unborn child. This is not a debate, and it's not just a biblical thing. Over 90% of biologists agree that life begins at conception, but it is also biblical. There are Bible verses such as Jeremiah 1:5, "Before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. Before you were born, I set you apart." We know that abortion ends the life of our unborn child. We can further understand this by asking ourselves a few questions. So I want you, if you feel like you need this exercise, I want you for a minute to just think about these questions as I ask them. And you can either write them down, write your answers down, or you can just, think them up in your head. But I'm going to ask some questions. So why did you choose abortion? Why was that the choice that you made? Were you trying to preserve your career? Were you trying to hide a secret from your parents? Why did you choose to have an abortion? And how did you justify that abortion was the best choice for you at that time? Why was that the choice above all other choices? How did you deny the loss that you experienced? Did you repeat some of that rhetoric over and over in your mind? How did you deny that you experienced a loss? And when could you no longer deny that loss? So I venture to guess, if you're listening to this podcast, there was a point in time, or maybe you're going through it right now, where you could no longer deny that you lost a child due to your decision of abortion. When was that? When could you no longer deny that? The second thing that we need to do to move on from denial is to remember that just because something is legal doesn't mean that it's good. So, In many states, abortion is legal, but it ends the life of a child, as we just talked about previously. So just because it's legal does not mean that it is good. If we look back on history, and I don't like to do this too often because I don't want people to take this out of context. So please understand that this is only to provide examples of things that have been legal or are legal that aren't good. If we look at history, there are several endless things that have been legal or are legal, but are not good and should not be done. Some of the more heinous examples are slavery. That used to be legal in our country, and that does not mean it was good. It's still legal in many parts of the world. That doesn't mean that it's good. If we look at Nazi Germany and the things that were legal in that time, those weren't good things. Those were not things that anybody should have experienced or gone through. If we look at some less drastic things, drinking alcohol is legal, but is it good? Not all the time, because you've got drunk drivers, you've got alcoholism. Smoking is legal, but is it good? Kind of leads to lung cancer in a lot of cases. And it's not very healthy for you. So while none of these things are abortion, all of these things are completely different in their own ways. But the point I'm trying to make is that legal doesn't mean that it's good. The third thing that we need to do to move on from denial is to acknowledge our role in our abortion decision. And this is difficult because many of us have to admit that we did something wrong. We ended the life of our unborn child. So again, I'm going to ask you a few questions, and I just want you can write them down or silently think about them. I'm going to ask you a few questions. What actions led you to become pregnant? What actions led you to become pregnant? Did you go through these actions willingly? Were you coerced? A little note about that before I ask you the rest of these questions. There are different scenarios for each woman who has chosen abortion. If you were coerced, i.e. raped, you are a victim of rape. And you are not the only person responsible for your decision to have an abortion. If you are listening to this and you were trafficked and you were forced to choose abortion, there are other people that are responsible for this that will have to answer for that one day. And I just wanted to acknowledge that because I don't ever want someone to listen to this and think that I don't see them. So back to the questions. Did you go into these actions willingly? Were you coerced? What did you think about abortion before you got pregnant? So did you know what abortion was? Were you pro-life? Were you pro-choice? Did you believe that abortion was the ending of a life? What did you think about abortion before you got pregnant? We kind of touched on this, but did you make the decision alone? Who else was involved? These questions are going to kind of tell you how many other people are responsible in your decision to have an abortion. And the last question, how has abortion affected your life? How has abortion affected your life? Only when we recognize and accept these things can we move through our grief of abortion. We must recognize that abortion ends a human life. It isn't good just because it's legal. And we do have a role in what we chose to do. Getting to this point is so important because it gives us that permission that we need to grieve that grief that was otherwise forbidden, as we talked about in last week's episode. We already have a roadblock because this grief is forbidden to us, and we are further denying ourselves when we stay in this state of denial about what we've chosen to do. Friend, you have permission to grieve. You have permission to move through this step. This step is a hard one. This is probably a heavy episode to listen to, but this is the next best step that you can take to seek healing. I just want to take a moment to thank you so much for listening to today's episode. It was a little heavier than what we may be used to, although quite honestly, if you are listening to a podcast about abortion, that is probably to be expected. But I do just want to thank you, and I pray that if you are listening today, that it was what you needed to start the process of moving through the stages of grief. The Bible study that we go through at our Forgiven and Set Free retreat touches on this way more in detail. And I would just truly recommend that you attend the retreat with us or find a retreat in your area. And if you need help with that, if you're not local to me, you can also send me a DM, and I would be happy to point you to someone or somewhere that you can seek that healing that you so deserve and need. So I do want to ask, if you were blessed by this episode, I would be so grateful if you would leave us a written review wherever you are listening. It just kind of helps us know if you're enjoying the show and what you guys are liking, and it truly blesses me and lights me up each time I read those reviews. So please do that if you haven't done so, and make sure that you come back next week because we will discuss anger in part 3 of our series of the stages of grief. So make sure you come back and tune in. I hope you have a great rest of your week and weekend, and I will see you on Monday. But until then, take care and God bless. Friend, thank you so much for listening to the podcast. My prayer is that all of you who listen will receive this truth and love and will walk away feeling blessed, hopeful, and excited for the next episode. Before you go, I would be so grateful if you would subscribe to the show and head to Apple Podcasts to leave us a review. Reviews are the only way I'm able to know that you are truly loving the show, and it brings me so much joy and happiness to get to hear directly from you. One last thing, if you would like to follow along with me on social media, please follow the show on Instagram at GoodNewsPod or my personal Instagram at BrittanyPoppy. I'll have these links for you in the show notes. And remember, you very well might know someone that needs this show. Spread the word if the Spirit leads, and make sure to tune in to the next episode. I can't wait to see you very soon.